Okay, so the next thing that we're going to look at is how to find the equation of a line. So for starters, let's just remember what that formula is. So the formula is y equals mx plus b. A lot of people like to remember that formula. Now m stands for slope, as we've seen, and b is a new letter here, and it stands for y-intercept. So just visually, what does that represent? Well, if we have our coordinate system, and let's say this is our line, the y-intercept is where we cross the y-axis. Okay. Good. So now, if we're given a point which happens to have a 0 in front, then actually we can determine that that is the y-intercept, because that's telling us that we're going over amount 0 and we're going up by some amount, in this case 7. So really we can just turn that into a value for b. So b is equal to 7. So if we have m and we have b, all we have to do is plug them in. So m goes first, so y equals m, then x plus b, so b is 7. So that's a really simple task. If they give us a slope m and a point with a 0 in front, then all we have to do is plug in the m into this position and the value for b, which is the y value here, into this position. So now, slightly more complicated is if they give us a point that's not the y-intercept and they give us also the slope. So in this case, we're going to treat this point as an x and a y, and we're going to plug into our equation y equals mx plus b, right? So if y is 3, we plug in 3, and then m is negative 4, x is 1, okay? Negative 4 times 1 is just negative 4. And then we have to simply add 4 to both sides. So that cancels out. We get 7 equals b. And so now that we have b and we also know what m is, right, we can simply plug them in. So we get negative 4x plus 7. Now, an important thing to take note of here is the fact that we use x and y in order to figure out what b is. But then when we plug into the equation, we do not plug in x and y in the end, okay? We only plug in x and y to find out what b is, but then to find the actual equation, we leave it as x and y. Okay, so once you get that down with a few more practice problems, then you can attempt to do these questions here, which don't even give you the slope. You have to figure out the slope yourself. All they give you is just 2 points. Okay, but luckily we've already practiced how to find the slope when we're given 2 points. So let's see if we remember how to do that. The formula is delta y over delta x, right? So we have to remember how to find delta y and delta x. So let's do that first. So we start at 1 and we move to minus 2. So the change in x, well, do we cross 0? The answer is yes. So then we have to look at the number parts and add them together. So we have 1 and 2. We add them together. We end up with 3. Now for the y's, we're going from 5 to minus 4. Do we cross 0? The answer is yes. So we have to add the number parts 5 and 4. And the answer is 9. So then we have to, of course, figure out the signs of these numbers. So for x, we're going from 1 to minus 2. That's going down by 3. And then for y, we're going from 5 to minus 4. That's also going down, that time by 9. So when we plug into the delta y over delta x, we end up with minus 9 over minus 3. So the minus signs will cancel out. And then the 9 on top divided by the 3 on bottom is equal to 3. Okay. So we then have our slope. But that's only the first step. So now what we need to do is similar to what we did in the previous example, because now we know what m is. We know that m is equal to 3. And we also know what one of the points are. So in particular, we'll use the first point. But in general, we could use either point as xy. So we're just going to use x as 1, and we're going to use y as 5, along with our m as 3. And then if we use our equation y equals mx plus b, notice that we know what y is, we know what m is, we know what x is. The only thing we don't know is what b is. And so we could plug in all the numbers that we know, and then we could find b, right? So we get 5 equals 3 times 1 plus b. So 5 equals 3 plus b. Then we subtract 3, and we find that 2 is equal to b. Okay? So now, once we know m, and we also know b, we can plug into the equation, and we'll find that it's y equals 3x plus 2. Right? mx plus b. That's the equation of the line. So now the next natural question that you might ask is, why are we doing this? What is the point of finding the equation of the line? Well, there's a few reasons why we might want to do that. But the first is, it gives us some power. So the power that it gives us is, if you tell me that you're interested in a certain x value, let's say x is equal to 5, then if I know the equation of the line, I could tell you what the y value is that goes with that x. All you have to do is plug in 5, and you see 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. So I could tell you right away that the y value that goes with it is 17. On the other hand, if you tell me a certain y value, let's say y is equal to 2, then I could tell you a certain x value that must go with that. So if I have y equals 2, I could plug in 2 there. Okay, and then I subtract 2 from both sides, and I get 0 equals 3x. I could divide by 3, and I get x equals 0. So the nice thing about knowing the formula is that given a value of x, you could find the corresponding y, and then vice versa. Given y, you could find the corresponding x. And what that corresponds to graphically is, we have a certain line that we know has an intercept of 2 in this case, and it has a slope of 3, which means it's pretty steep. Okay? Because we have to go up 3 when we go over 1. So the next point up here would be 5 and a 1. Okay, whoops, 1 comma 5 should be. So yeah, what that corresponds to is, if I want to know what happens, for example, at x equals, let's say, -1. Yes, I could plug in a -1 for the x, and I could determine what the y value is. So it basically will tell me the height that I'll be at when I'm looking at an x value of -1. Okay? Very good.